I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a farmer. I farm with my dad and brother at Thompson Farm and Ranch LLC, and we're located in Almena, Kansas. Basically, I came here to talk about how changing your management can build soils and build a better soil. You know, a little change in management can go a long way to limiting evaporation, getting more moisture in the soil, and making your soil a little bit healthier so you can grow healthier and better crops. I think that there are three key points, and number one would be having plenty of residue out on your field. Number two is to plant crops with a purpose to improve the soil. And number three, to have probably a ruminant grazing component into the cropping and grazing routine on your farm and operation. For people that have not necessarily had a grazing animal or a ruminant on their operation, there's a lot of ways to get into it. Maybe you have a son or a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law that wants to come back to add to the operation, so it's a place for a revenue stream for them. Maybe you have a neighbor or a neighbor's son or daughter that would like to get into it, and you could partner with a close neighbor or a family friend to get that livestock component on your land. It is an investment in your future, and it does take some time to see changes. It probably depends on how degraded your system is. In a little better soil, you might see changes within the first couple years. Some soils might take 3 or 4 years to start turning around, but if you do leave that maximum amount of residue on top of the soil, and you do plant some varied crops out there so you have some differences to stimulate that microbiology, probably anywhere from 3 to 5 years in a time frame when you start seeing them turn around. And sometimes you just have to get out there in the soil with a shovel or a spade and just kind of look and see if it hasn't changed or looks a little bit different. In our soils, we do both traditional soil tests. We also do a Haney soil test, which is a biologic soil test that kind of tells you, and we use that as kind of a benchmark about every second or third year to kind of see if we're moving in the right direction, if the biology is improving. And also there's a PLFA test, which is basically a measure of the microbial life in your soils. You can use all these as kind of benchmarks and kind of help you set goals for the future on your journey of soil health. Probably the most common question I get asked is, in a drier environment, how do you make soil health work or soil health pay? And I think a lot of the things go back to, if you're improving the soil resource, you can eventually start seeing less evaporation. So even though it doesn't rain anymore on your farm, you have less evaporation, so your crops have a little bit of extra water to get that extra little bit of drink they need for that last few days of the growing season. You might also have that big rain that comes through, and you've harvested maybe an extra inch of moisture that you wouldn't have, that would have ran into the ponds or into the ditch otherwise. So little things like that, little changes in management can go a long way to getting through dry periods of weather. You might see certain things like, especially like weed species changing. You might not see the same weeds on your field all the time, or when you keep a little more cover on your soils, you might not see as many weeds. That can have benefits as reduced amounts of trips across the field with chemical, and also if you have reduced trips across the field with chemical, you're going to actually have prolonged life of your chemical, because weeds won't be as likely to be resistant because there's less trips across that field to keep them clean. So it can kind of extend chemical life and also extend your system and improve your system, towards better soil health.